At a Royal Air Force base located in Scotland, preparations are underway for an unfolding crisis. A transatlantic flight has been hijacked. Colonel Drummond is summoned to take charge. He arrives serious and focused. An officer informs him that the pilot and the co-pilot are presumed dead, and the one of the passengers is on Germany's terrorist watch list. The team establishes contact with the plane and instructs it to land. Dumont requests a thorough inspection and tries to make contact with the crew. Suddenly, there is a movement near one of the doors. A parachute falls and a small boy emerges. 2 RAF trucks rush in to pick him up. It's immediately clear that this is a serious terrorist incident. Dumont notices someone new in the cockpit and radios a warning that any sudden move will be met with gunfire. He orders the stranger to stay seated and raise his hands. The stranger insists he is not a terrorist and begs for a chance to explain. Later they send in a translator to speak with the boy Elias, but he's too stern to respond. The story flashes back to the previous day. In a hotel room, Elias's mother, Nadia, prepares for her next flight. She speaks on the phone with her doctor in New York about a mysterious illness she is suffering from. Later, Elias calls to tell her that he's already checked in their luggage. That night, at the airport, Nadia meets him. They pass through the security and wait to board. Nadia goes to the restroom where she mixes her medication. Back in the lounge, Elias chats with a man named Farid, who asks where his mother is. Soon Nadia returns and they board the plane together. A flight attendant offers coffee to the pilots, then heads towards the crew area and asks a colleague named Ebel to deal with a troublesome first-class passenger. The flight departs from Germany, bound for the United States. Later, Nadia returns from the bathroom, writes in her notebook, and finds a photo of her with her husband. She recalls a moment when their car broke down in a remote area. Her husband went for help, leaving her alone with the baby. Eventually, she wandered into an abandoned house, following a trail of blood to the basement, discovered her husband's lifeless body, and was bitten by a vampire just before dawn. Back on the plane, something stirs in the front cabin. Ball tries to calm a passenger, but the situation escalates. A sky marshal intervenes. Ball pulls a knife and kills the second marshal. Another passenger incapacitates the first. Then Ball sends Curtis to find and kill the third marshal. Curtis returns with the gun, and Ball murders the last marshal in front of another hijacker, Carl, who looks visibly shaken. Meanwhile, Nadia senses something is wrong. Ball reveals a firearm and forces the passengers toward the rear of the plane. Berg, another hijacker, heads into the cockpit, speaks with the co-pilot Bastian, and throws the pilot's body out of the plane. He announces he now controls the aircraft and orders the passengers to remain still with their hands on their seats. Yuri, yet another hijacker, tampers with the flight recorder and tells Berg that the co-pilot has altered the plane's course. Elias, worried about his mother, studies the plane's layout to help her avoid sunlight. Curtis escorts Farid to the front while Carl tries to keep Ball calm. Elias leaves his seat. Nadia follows, but Ball shoots her in front of Elias, then takes the boy hostage. Carl wants Ball to keep quiet. Berg and Curtis bicker about the chaos. Berg scores Ball for acting without orders and uses Nadia's shooting to intimidate the other passengers. Nadia regains consciousness in the cargo hold. Hearing dogs barking, she climbs through a hatch. Meanwhile, Berg forces Farid and 2 others to record a fake terrorism video. Nadia hides under a vehicle. When Curtis and Yuri come to gather bomb-making materials, Yuri discovers her. Nadia kills Yuri and feeds on a dog. Later, Farid returns and sits beside Elias. Nadia, now fully transformed, tries to medicate herself but overhears the hijackers mentioning a countdown. She drinks Yuri's blood to regain strength and heads for the cockpit. The hijackers trick the passengers by threatening them to release the gas if anyone resists. They find Yuri's body next to the dead dog, Nadia's decoy, to throw them off her trail. Soon, Nadia reaches the rear and the passengers panic, rushing forward to the cockpit and realizing the pilots are gone. Nadia pleads for someone to know how to fly the plane. A man volunteers and she guides him to the controls. Farid stays behind to explain the hijackers' true plan. The hijackers prepare to parachute out in diving suits. The new volunteer pilots inform Nadia that the autopilot is still engaged. Nadia watches the hijackers via the security cameras and tells the pilot not to change the course until they have jumped. But Ball discovers she's alive, returns with Berg and demands to know where a passenger is. One of the hijackers hits Nidia, and then they hammer at the cockpit door. Nidia orders the pilot to redirect the plane back. Noticing the change, Berg flies into a rage, kills the passenger, and threatens more violence until they open the door. Ball brings a little girl to the front, holds her in the view of Nidia, and begins a countdown to shoot her. Nidia bursts through the cockpit, sinks her fangs into Berg's neck, and pandemonium erupts. The pilot locks the door behind Nidia. She kills Berg and pursues the other hijackers, but then Berg, another hijacker, begins to transform into a vampire. Nidia senses the change, returns and finishes him. Nidia, now fully aware of ticking time and the looming danger, drinks vampire's blood to restore her power and makes her way back towards the cockpit, but pull back her fangs to avoid harming him. Later, she visited the place where she was first turned and met the vampire's father, who confessed his son couldn't control his bloodlust, and believing vampires brings only pain, he shot Nidia. Back on the plane, one hijacker, Ball, begins crafting a wooden stake. Elias leaves the cockpit, finds his mother in the lavatory and helps her. As the hijackers return, the pilot locks himself in again. Nidia approaches Ball, but she's ready with the UV light and burns her. She collapses. He fills a syringe with her vampire blood and prepares to inject himself. Just then, Elias points a gun at him. Ball lunges for the gun. It discharges and shatters a window. Bastien reports that they have only 10 minutes of oxygen left. Nidia helps Elias into an oxygen mask, takes the gun, and shoots Ball, who manages to escape. The pilot faints in the cockpit, unable to reach a mask. Nidia hands Elias to Farid and tells him to keep the boy safe. Suddenly, the plane dives sharply. Nidia races after Ball, finds him in an armored car on board and fires. Yet her bullets have no effect. Ball injects himself with Nidia's vampire blood and begins to transform. Nidia knows she must stop him before he grows too powerful. She finds alcohol and matches, pours fuel into the car and sets it alight while watching him burn, remembering the old vampire's words that their kind must not be spread. The hijackers notice the smoke. Nidia quickly doses the fire and returns to the cockpit. The hijackers fire at her as the passengers panic and rush forward. Farid flees with Elias. The hijackers find Ball fully transformed and terrifying, and he bites Curtis, infecting him and turning him as well. Nidia locks the cargo hold behind her. Elias screams that the passengers want to harm her. Farid reassures him otherwise, but someone fires and Nidia defends herself and attempts to flee. Elias begs her not to hurt Farid. Hearing vampires trying to escape the hold, Nidia bolts back and locks Ball behind a door. Farid tries to help but is bitten. Another man shoots Ball to prevent the infection from spreading. Nidia cuts Farid's hands to free him. Curtis climbs back onto the plane. Nidia fights both him and Ball, saving a flight attendant. Then she returns to the passengers. Farid tells them Nidia is now on their side. All head to the cockpit. The plane is almost out of fuel, and they must find the nearest airport. Elias and Farid convince Nidia to hide in a dark space under the cockpit. Bastien stays with them. The pilot finally contacts a British airbase, reporting the hijacking, but that the hijackers are now locked in the hold. Soon afterward, Elias searches Nidia's medication while passengers hear the vampire snarling. A wounded man decides to be bitten, believing it will save him. He frees Ball, who immediately kills him and attacks the others. Nidia and Farid realize things are getting worse. People run towards the cockpit, trying to break in, but Bastien holds the door shut. Nidia understands that they can't land the plane or the vampires will escape. Farid suggests landing and then remotely detonating the plane. They head to the fuel tank to place explosive, but discover there's no timer. Nidia decides to stay behind to destroy the plane. After everyone goes, she tells Elias someone else must set it. Then she runs into the hold with a UV light for protection, searches for the timer among the hijackers, and is pursued by the vampires. She makes it back, but is attacked, dropping the UV light. Nidia sees that her son is in danger and asks Bastien if the plane is still on autopilot, and if the airbase can land it. Receiving affirmative answers, she asks Farid to promise to protect Elias, knowing she won't return. She sinks her fangs into Bastien and fully embraces her vampire nature. At the same time, Ball attacks Elias. Nidia appears and fights him. He bites her. Thinking quickly, Elias opens the cargo door hatch. Nidia seizes the chance, shoving Ball out of the plane. As the door opens, Farid tilts the aircraft so that sunlight floods in, burning Ball to death. Elias gives Nidia a little of his own blood. She awakens, almost losing control, but restrains herself, pushing him away and returns to the hold. Later at the RAF base, Elias asks a translator to help Farid, but she refuses. Elias explains they must save him before sunset or the vampires will attack the soldiers. They sedate Farid and load him onto a stretcher. Colonel Dumont and his team decide to wait while the vampires feed on the bodies. Farid pleads with the soldiers, but they don't believe him and finally shoot him, dragging him off the plane. Meanwhile, Elias is in an ambulance. He secretly sedates the pandemic, takes his teddy bear, and escapes back to the plane. Inside, the soldiers are attacked by vampires. Farid sees Elias nearby, but can't get his attention. Unaware, Elias watches his mother feeding on a soldier. He calls her by name. Realizing she's no longer the mother he knew, Elias makes a difficult decision. He triggers the explosive, blowing up the plane. Colonel Drummond and his team watch in shock as the aircraft is destroyed. Farid finds Elias among the debris. Elias and Farid cling to each other, the last remaining survivors of the nightmarish journey.